Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Blue Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. And today I'm joined in the studio by Marta Landoni, who has a PhD in psychology at the Catholic University of Milan, where she studied the influence of polymorphism, 5-HTT-LPR, on postpartum disorders. Over the last 3 years, she has been involved in several projects on postpartum disorders and mental health. Today's topic is open-mindedness, which we're going to explore from the aspect of the effectiveness of being open-minded in decision-making using mindfulness techniques. Let's learn together. And welcome to the studio, Marta.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. I have told you from the beginning that this is my first in-person recording in a very long time, and I'm excited. The energy is always different, and it's rare to have guests from Melbourne, and we're trying to find more guests in Melbourne, and I'm hoping that next year we can make that happen even more. So thanks for being here. And how are you feeling? How is the first podcast recording experience been going for you? This is the first time for you. You said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Definitely exciting, and really happy to be here. So thanks for welcoming me here.
Yeah, that's really good. So I've read out a little bit of the bio that you sent us about yourself, but I know that there's so much more to be told about a person. And I would love to ask you if you could perhaps introduce yourself some more in terms of your background. I know you have a very interesting background being a migrant in Australia, just like myself. And, I'm sure everyone would be keen to find out more about that. Maybe some other fun facts that you haven't mentioned yet, so we can, kickstart this conversation on a fun note.
Okay. Well, my grand, as we can hear, it's Italian. I'm Italian. And please take it easy with me because English is my second language. So.
Same.
Exactly. It's kind of like struggling sometimes in English. But yeah, I'm Italian. I did all of my studies in Italy. I'm a psychologist, basically. So I started with my bachelor. I did that kind of academic path, and it's pretty long. So I started with the bachelor. I changed so many topics, like going from resilience to, as you say, like the last one was the postpartum depression. And I think that every one of these topics, it's pretty much connected with some of my personal experience, particularly like happened during the childhood. So if you think about like the last one, the postpartum depression, it's because I lost my brother. Well, my mom lost my brothers when I was 3 years old, and it was, a kind of traumatic event for her. And I was trying to understand better how to help her and how, to provide her maybe, some kind of coping strategies to reframe that situation at the moment. So this is why I started to study all the part of the postpartum depression in a kind of genetical way that it's kind, of weird at the same time because it's really complex and complicated. Try to understand what's the DNA or what's it's connected with some kind of mental disorder. But yeah, fun fact is that I always been fascinating about positive psychologies and self-development in a kind of obsessive way as a kind of autistic children about this. And yeah, I was thinking before, one of my favorite also book or film about that is it's Eat, Pray, and Love. Of course,
Eat, Pray, Love,
self-development and mindfulness. It's kind of granted. But it was funny because My partner is Australian, so this year we returned back to Italy to see my family. And actually, we planned to go to Naples because I was obsessed to go to the pizza shop where Julia Roberts went at the time.
Oh, interesting.
And I said, you're gonna be a fake.
I've actually, this is fun fact, I have not read the book and I have not watched the movie. And it's a very big deal. I'm so behind, I know. But yeah, I am gonna read the book. I've already bought it. I think I bought it a couple of months ago. It's on my shelf. Yeah, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna watch the movie, and I'm gonna know exactly what you're talking about right now.
Wow,
but pizza always sounds great. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's Friday. Maybe I'll go get pizza after work as well. So that sounds great. So thank you for sharing that. And you kind of spoiled a little part that we are going to start with, which is actually Have You Met Marta? We have a section called, Have You Met Marta? To get to know you better by getting your recommendation. You already mentioned Eat, Pray, Love for your book and movie favorite. But I'm going to ask you to give one more recommendation for each. What is a book you would recommend? Mm-hmm. And then what is a movie you would recommend?
Okay. Well, a book that I would recommend, it's hard because I've always been kind of nerd child, the kind of child that she doesn't play so much like with dolls and everything, but she prefers like to read book. So I've been reading so many books in my life. I think that the one that impressed me the most, it's from Clarissa Estes. It's a book that it's called like Women Will Run with the Wolves.
Oh, yeah. My friend told me about it.
It's amazing.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What's your friend told about you, about that book?
I think we had a conversation about, books about feminism and, women, and we were kind of like listing some books, and there are not that many yet. Yeah. I think. Okay, there are more and more, but there were not that many. And one of the books that she was recommending, she was like, I've read this. It's amazing. You got to read it. Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I was like, okay, great. And then I still haven't got it, so I'm going to get it for sure, now that you've mentioned it.
It's great, exactly. It's about like feminism, and at the same time, gather a better understanding of the psyche of the woman and everything on a psychological aspect. So it's all based on the fact that we have a kind of instinctual nature that sometimes, like especially in the Western world, we could be like lost. We will have our experience and everything. So it's return back to our core part and our nature.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's on my list for sure. I'm going to get it. I'm going to actually read it this time, now that you've mentioned it. Okay. So how about a movie?
I'm not so much a movie person. If I have to admit, like in the last period, I just see movies to try to escape reality.
I hear you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I hear you.
When I just want, to relax or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that my only favorite movie is Eat, Pray, and Love.
Yeah,
at the moment.
it's very consistent.
Yeah, exactly.
Very consistent. That's it.
I have a theory behind it. It's based, in three main countries. So one, of course, it's Italy, and as Italian.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing, that it's based on other two countries that I pretty much love. So one is India, and I have also previous experience like of humanitarian work in India for a lot of years. And the other one is Bali, and there's reserve a particular like place in my heart because it's where I met my partner. So,
Bali. Yeah. It's on my list to kind of go to Bali again, like this holiday period, because I'm like, it's great, and it's gonna be warm and nice, and people are gonna be like just traveling and having fun. So yeah,
exactly.
I do like it. I loved it, and I'm definitely coming back for it. So actually, we have one colleague in our team from Bali as well.
I think
fun fact. So,
yeah.
So yeah, it would be interesting to go there.
Nah.
But we digress. Okay, let's go back to this. What about your favorite podcast? Not this one. What is another favorite podcast?
Yeah, exactly. So I prefer reading over podcasts.
Okay.
If I have to admit, and I think that maybe one of my favorite podcasts is of an Italian teacher that she is a mindfulness teacher and also yoga teacher. And the way that I like it, it's because it's all based on a kind of like body and mind connection.
Oh, okay.
So every session gain a kind of, of problem or issue that maybe you're dealing with your life on that kind of perspective that you have in mind. And I think that it's great because it's kind of like holistic approach that I really love, like when you speak about like people on your way, to other people.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Okay. It sounds like it's very in line with the topic today.
Yeah.
Open-mindedness, mindfulness. We'll talk more about that for sure. How about your famous role model? Or if not famous, then your personal role model?
That's a tricky part. Because as you say, I think, it's more personal, more than based on like being famous. I've been growing up in a family, that they teach me to understand better like the value of the life. And success, of course, it's one of these values, but it's not like only based on being famous, but it's being on how you connect with other people and why you transmit to other people. So I think that I have different role models growing up, like, and changing like during my years and everything. If I have to think about now, maybe one of my inspirational model, and it's also like pretty close to me, it's my partner, I think.
Yeah.
Because when I met him, he's the Paralympian wheelchair athlete. So when I met him, he's the most positive person that exists in this world.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing that I saw about him. And he went through a lot, like in his life and everything, but a kind of resilient perspective. Like he took it out the most of everything in his life, and he arrived to this point in his life, where he's helping other people at the same level, to reach this kind of like independence and becoming themselves again after like the accidents or whatever happened to you.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of like reminder of inspiration, like today, every day.
That's beautiful. We've heard about a lot of different role models. This is the first time someone's mentioned their partner on the show. I think it's important because I've heard a lot. We actually have another show also by LMSL called the Relationships Science Insights Podcast, Reloscope. I don't know if this is going to be related to that show, but I just want to mention, like, I guess, relationship is so important in our lives, and, you rub up that energy on the other person, and they also rub up their energy on you. So it's kind of like when that person is so positive, you get that energy for yourself as well. So it's kind of a reflection of who you are when you choose your partner. And I'm so glad to hear that, your role model is your partner. You seem like a really positive person, and I've just met you for 15 minutes, so I guess a part of that is your personal positivity, and also a big part of that must be from your partner. Yeah, that's really great. Great to hear. So the next thing that I want to ask is about education. So we ask, what our guests have been learning, because that's very interesting. And you have completed your PhD. You've done a lot of work recently and a lot of projects. So I wonder, what is a course that you've completed recently that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm doing actually a course right now. So when I came here, I cannot, still work as a kind of psychologist because I have to register my title. So I'm working as a behavioral practitioner that I'm finding really interesting because it's all connected with positive psychology, you know, like enhancing other people's skills, quality of life and everything. And I'm studying like as a behavioral practitioner. So I'm making it other training around, this area to understand like better how to help the people to enhance their quality of life. So I already done like one course with the Melbourne University. I'm doing another one almost 6 months, I think, or something.
Also with UniMelb?
Yeah, with the UniMelb.
Wow, interesting. Wow, it's I mean, I was when I saw that you have a PhD, I was like, oh yeah, you must have done a lot of learning and studying, and now you're doing even more of that. And UniMelb is tough, but you're getting there. Sounds like you're doing great. Great to hear that you're continually learning and improving. So let's go into the topic. Now that we've got to know you much better, I definitely have got to know you better. I'm hoping that our audience has warmed to you as well, and this show is all about well-being. And today we're here to talk about well-being. Yeah, I'm using my yoga voice. So I wanted to ask you to help us to define well-being from your perspective. It means different things to different people, and I wonder what it is for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's an interesting and at the same time, difficult question, because well-being, it's pretty much a subjective concept when we speak about this. I think that the background that I saw is that in my idea, well-being, it's not like an absence of a disease, just mere, absence of a disease or infirmity or whatever is gonna come, with that. Because if we think about like on a scientific like point of view a little bit, and we think about like the definition of the World Health Organization, we can define health is a kind of factors that they are associated with all the part of the mental, physical, and also social aspects of our life, and not just like the absence of the disease.
Yeah.
So it's a multi-dimensional construct that has a lot of areas like within itself. And in my personal point of view, like well-being, it's who we are and what makes us who we are. So in a kind of like short term, it's like what we like about ourselves and about our life. And for most of the people, sometimes when we think about this, like who we are, we think about like our physical health. Because of course, like our body, it's the vessel and everything that accompany us like throughout all the experience of our life. And we need to like treat him as a kind of temple and prevent all the kind of disease that it can come up in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in an holistic way, we have other areas that they are really important, particularly like from my point of view, that it's all the area like of the mental aspect, of course, as a psychologist. So all, the connection, being aware that our thoughts and our emotions, it's what bring, all the part of the awareness like in our body of what was going on, or like how our body react to our thoughts and our emotions. And at the same time all the part of the social aspects I know that it could be how we connect to the others, how we create bond with others, but at the same time how we connect with ourselves, because sometimes we forget like to connect with ourselves. And the last part that I think that it's important for myself, like in order for well-being, it's all the part of spiritual. So which is the meaning of our life. Like which is the purpose, the things, that make us moving forwards, like the barriers that we can find in our life. I love, for example, like Japanese word that it's ikigai.
Oh, ikigai. I love ikigai.
It's a kind, if I think about well-being, it comes to my mind like ikigai. So it's the thing, whatever it's gonna be, that make you like waking up in the morning and have a sense of purpose in your life.
I just want to quickly make a disclaimer for for people that understand nothing that just happened, and we just laughed because we kicked each other under the table. I think that's funny. So in case they're not watching it and just listening, by the way, we just kick each other on the table. It's fun. It keeps it real, I think it's fun. So coming back to what you just said, I think it's so interesting because besides this show about well-being, I also host a show about happiness. And in that show, we mention this concept a lot, actually. So when it comes to defining happiness, a lot of our guests say it's not about being happy all the time. So in the same sense, well-being is not about not being ill and just, being well all the time, but also there's so much more to it. And I guess this is the overlap between happiness and well-being, because in the frameworks that we use on our shows, there are actually overlapping elements. So, purpose in life is, I believe, one of those. And there are a couple of other ones as well. But I think that the definition of well-being is so broad to me. Like I hear, different definitions from experts, and everyone defines it so differently. And I'm like, it's so broad. Like it can be anything that has to do with you. Because your well-being encompasses everything about you. And it's not just your physical health, your mental health, but, spiritual self, social self, everything. And I guess that's something that you just touched on that I found so interesting. But I want to ask you about the misconceptions, because while we have these definitions and we see well-being in a very particular way, a lot of people don't see well-being in the same light. And I have heard quite a few misconceptions about well-being. not just from our guests, but also from people around me. And I wonder, from your perspective, you must have worked with a lot of people. You know, you just mentioned at the beginning before our recording that you have emergencies and things like that. So I wonder if you have in mind a list of the top misconceptions about well-being that you want to share with us.
Yeah. Well, I think that I agree with you when you say that it's really subjective and it depends, from person to person, like to decide what well-being means for each person and everyone else.
Yeah.
But that's also like the beauty of the well-being, because if you think in a kind of mindful way, it means that in every moment of our life we can focus to maybe one aspect that is predominant to that moment, and that we want to maybe heal or grow this aspect, and that's part, it's the well-being for ourselves in that time. But this misconception is that, I think from my point of view, it's well-being if we look at it from the derivation from the Latin that means stare bene. It's like be well. So everyone think that well-being is just being well. And the opposite part of the well-being, it's being unwell. But also in the academic sector, it's quite difficult to understand what means being unwell. I mean, it could be like being healed. It could be, potential of other things that make more complicated to understand what well-being is.
Yeah.
Because if you cannot define the opposite, how you can define what is the positive part of that?
Yeah.
And I think, that is interesting that in the last years, there is a lot of movement around like the positive psychology. So well-being, it's a kind of really well spread like concept that everyone, wants to start to talk about.
Yeah.
And that's great because, it's only like in the last year that we really understand that we are the master of our lives, the creator, of everything, and that we can really be proactive in making whatever well-being means to us happen for our life and having a kind of growth going forward.
Yeah. So I guess the misconception that I heard there, the biggest one that people get wrong is perhaps well-being means that I'm always great. Yeah. And everything is fine. It's not, it's not part of well-being. I think that it cannot happen, really. Like, I just truly believe that there's no one on this planet that goes through their lives and saying everything is fine all the time. I don't think that is possible. Maybe this can be up for debate, but I just think so. And I guess that is part of open-mindedness, which is the topic of today. Because I want to ask you now to actually go into the topic where we talk about open-mindedness, mindfulness, and all the different things that you want to touch on.
Yeah.
So how would you define open-mindedness?
That's an interesting one. Open-mindedness could be, I think, described to be open to new ideas, to be open, like it's a kind of positive personality traits, that it's like thinking critically and at the same time, thinking rationally.
Yeah.
It's stepping out whatever is your comfort zone, and try, to really get new ideas, new information about like your life or maybe the problem that you are experiencing. It's not so easy because sometimes what we are, it's like that we are narrow-minded, about how we think, We always focus to what we know because that's the easiest part. Being growing up, maybe with some kind of like values or information that our parents give to us, and growing up that we think about ourselves, or maybe also about like others in the way that our like family teaches. So being open-minded, sometimes, it's tricky to open your horizon and see that there are like other really strategies outside there, like other point of views for other people. But I think that it's really important if we think particularly like to social relationship, or at the same time like in the work environment, because when there is a conflict, like it's one of the skills, or also like for leadership, it's one of the main skills that you need to have. Because being open-minded, means that the person that is narrow-minded, it's the person, that approach the kind of conflict by saying, okay, that's my point of view.
Yeah.
That's the best point of view, and you need to adapt and to adjust to this point of view. While the person, that is open mind, approach to the diversity of the other person and say, okay, but that could be a strength, their point of view.
Yeah.
What about if I think about this, if I think different, what I can, take it out like from this point of view?
Yeah.
What can teach me? So
I couldn't agree more. I love that. Immediately when I saw the word open-mindedness, and this might be because of my bias, because my background is in project management, I saw that word and I was like, agile. That means agile to me. Like,
Yeah.
it's, it's just kind of like things change all the time, but you're open to all the possibilities, and you work with different people, but you're just kind of like, you run with it, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But I guess, what you just talked about is so interesting, especially when we're talking about decision making today and, mindfulness techniques, and we'll touch on that a bit more. But the overarching theme is open-mindedness, which is what we need to have. And I've noticed that a lot of the times, and I'm, fortunately and unfortunately, I'm also in a leadership position right now. And what I've noticed when I interview candidates or work with my teams is sort of this observation of their bias and asking them about whether they can overcome the bias in the first place, especially for people who are really experienced.
Yeah.
So when I interview people for the leadership positions or, in really higher roles, for people that are entry level, it's kind of easy to work with. But when you interview people for leadership position, the first question I ask is kind of like, so you're very experienced and, I enjoy seeing all the things that are on your resume. How good are you at unlearning things? I think that's part of open-mindedness, because it's so easy to just keep doing things the way that you did it. For example, in my previous job, I did things so differently compared to now. And then I also had to kind of unlearn a lot of that. And sometimes I would go into doing the same thing, sort of like, just kind of, for example, solving something really quickly.
Yeah.
And not really consulting others, or kind of doing things in a way that I think works, but then in this environment it doesn't work, and then that asks for so much open-mindedness. And I'm not perfect at it, but because it is a skill that we all need to continually learn and develop, and it's just so hard, especially when it's in the context of our well-being. It's not just work. This is one example, but there's so many other aspects. I don't know. Another example I can think of is exercising. I used to think that, this is a long time ago, by the way, I used to think that people that can run really early in the morning are crazy. So, I was like, why? How? It's just calm down.
Yeah.
It's so early. And then now I'm one of those people. So, open-mindedness. I changed my perspective. And I used to think that it's impossible to eat more plant-based for me. Now I'm doing that.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. I'm unlearning so many things, and I'm like, this is exactly the topic that we're talking about, especially if we're mentioning our well-being. And with that sort of context, I want to ask you about your professional opinion. How do you think open-mindedness can impact our well-being?
Well, I think on different levels, as you were saying, I was laughing before, like on example of the people jogging at 6 a.m.
Running, yeah.
Because I was, one of the people, but not for that, but for Pilates, because I do Pilates like as an exercise. And I saw, on the first time that I arrived here, like scheduling class for 6 a.m., like to 6 p.m. And I was saying, oh God, who is the person that goes at 6 a.m. at Pilates? And after I tried once, and it's actually, great, because you have more energy, throughout the day and everything. And you just, also here can reschedule like your brain in thinking, okay, I can do something different.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's actually, affecting my well-being, because I have more energetic towards the day and everything. And, I can also find time and maybe create time for other things that I would after. So yeah, definitely one of the examples is like getting new insight, maybe for new ideas or whatever, you're going to come that you are passionate about, like, and getting also new perspective. I think it's also connected with all the part of the personal growth, because if you want to grow, you need to open your horizon, and this could be, in a kind of like broader way that is, I think, myself, like I came here to Australia from a different country. If I was, a person that was not so much open, I couldn't start, like to find it, maybe all the barriers and everything in coming here.
Yeah.
Instead, of looking all the positive aspects, all the opportunity and everything that this experience could bring to me. And definitely, like we think on a kind, of also physical condition, the more we are open-minded, the more means, that our brain is kind of like reflecting, creating new pattern and way, new connection, and that means that we keep our brain young. So it's definitely something that on the long side, on the long term, it could be a potential benefit. But yeah, I think these are like the first thing that's come up to my mind when I think about.
Oh, so good. You mentioned so many interesting points. I was like, yes. I was like, nodding my head. I was like, I know I nod my head a lot, but I'm going to have to keep doing that. It's so good. First thing is personal growth. I think when it comes to our well-being, it's not about managing our health and aspects of our life so we can, sort of flourish in this moment, but also how we can grow further in the future. And I think that's where you can really anchor your point of well-being, because if there's no growth, there will be a point where you feel stagnant, even if everything else is great. And I think that's so important because in one of the previous podcasts that I just recorded for the happiness show, we talked about purpose in life. And that's tied into, personal growth directly. And then the other thing that you said, like rewiring our brain and making our brains younger. This is something that I've heard so much this year, way more than any other years before. And I don't know why. Neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
I've heard this word, I think 100 times more than any other years.
Yeah.
And I believe there's got to be a reason. So, I'm sure you encounter this in your research, in your work. So what are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. Like neuroplasticity is something that it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a new concept.
It is.
Because we didn't think that we can redirect our brain and everything and making new connections, or making work like that. Also here we are, we can direct maybe some areas of our brains to work more and more efficiently when needed, compared to other areas according, to what is the scope and everything. But it's pretty much connected with all the part of the mindfulness because one of the main aspects of mindfulness is neuroplasticity.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. Straight to the point. And that's the show. That's it. We're done. No, we're not. Okay. That's so interesting because the next question is actually about, mindfulness and decision making, which is something that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
And I think when I saw the topic, I stopped for a second because I was like, there's so much connection there. Where are we going with this? So I'm keen to find out from you. So we have open-mindedness. We have decision making.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we have mindfulness. So how do you unpack this relationship for our audience? Because it's a mouthful. There's a lot to be talked about here.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I think that the part of the mindfulness is a kind, of help when it comes, to all the parts of the open-mindedness, in particular related to the decision making. Because definitely, one of the main aspects of the mindfulness is bringing awareness, in a kind of non-judgmental way and to the present moment. So what the mindfulness does, it's bringing awareness, to your thoughts, but at the same time, to your sensation in your body. And if you think about the decision-making process, there are so many aspects that we were saying before, all the part of the bias that we are maybe not conscious of.
Yeah.
And the beauty of the mindfulness is that the more you become aware of your thoughts, what is going on in your head, the more you become aware and you can see, this kind of bias that you have maybe. And at the same time, the more you can understand whether there is a new problem or whether there is a new situation that you need to handle with, you say, okay, I'm not going to adapt whatever I adapted before as my kind of previous schemes that could derive my childhood or everything, or I'm not going to act maybe out, of the fear of the future or the emotion that I'm having right now in my body. But I'm acting according, to a kind of process of decision making, being open-minded, gathering all the information and everything. And after, in a kind of slow path, like moving on this and finding a solution that is the best for the moment. So definitely there are so many interconnections between all these kind of concepts and ideas that
Yeah, that is so interesting. Yeah, I think when you mention open-mindedness and how we use that in our decision-making process, I was kind of like, interesting. I've actually never heard that before. To be honest, like mindfulness, maybe.
yeah.
I might have heard about like using mindfulness in your decision-making process to make sure you are aware of what you're doing. So because sometimes decisions are kind of split second.
Yeah.
This, and then you make a decision. But open-mindedness is different.
Yeah.
I think that is something that is quite new, at least to me. I haven't heard that before. And I think you are right. We gather information so we can actually make a decision. And I guess a big part of that is being open-minded about being open-minded because sometimes we're not even thinking about the fact that we need to gather information in the first place. Sometimes we just make decision, and I can speak for myself. I don't know about you and others, but I can speak for myself when I say sometimes in life, not in work, because in work you need to be rational, but in life, I've noticed myself making decisions based on my emotions.
Yeah.
And it's not great. So, any advice on that? I need to change it.
I mean, it's a kind, a normalization if you think about this. Like, it's a kind of strategies. I don't know if you have ever learned, like the fight or flight, like that we use. When we are in this kind of state of emotions, our assessor, we have this kind of mood, of activation because we see a kind of danger, a potential danger, and so we need to act based on our emotion, what we are feeling, in order, to not get caught or whatever it's gonna be there for the danger. So absolutely, that's maybe one of the difficulty, like of if you are not open mind, like the impulsivity that it comes, like when you make a decision or something. And the mindfulness, it's helping you, like also that with the open mindedness, like to take time to that, to recognize, to not being impulsive in making your decision, but to try to see all the different options that you have on the plate, like for the moment, and to go with the best one that is for you for that particular occasion.
Yeah, definitely. That's something to note because it's easier said than done, I think. Like, it's easier to say, okay, next time I feel something, I'm going to embrace the emotions while gathering information, because the last thing you want when you're very emotional and hot-headed is kind of like think about what is reasonable and rational. I'm like, well, that's good to think about. I think one technique that I picked up maybe on the happiness show is actually to pause. I believe there's, one of the practice is actually to pause before reacting. And I think sometimes it's really hard, especially if you're in a situation where you need to react really quickly. But I guess even just taking a deep breath, which is part of mindfulness, because I think we have had this conversation about mindfulness with another guest recently about, sometimes it's just good to notice the sensation that you're feeling and just calm yourself down in that instance. It's not about taking 10 minutes or an hour, sometimes it's just one breath. That's how effective mindfulness can be. And and I didn't think about that. I guess I've noticed it in people a lot. Like when something happens and they're kind of like, but then, it's I think it's like, sure, we can do that. And combining that with bringing our attention back to our body and what we're feeling and all the data that we can gather, that is very important in saying that we have a choice. Because I think it's being open-minded and being mindful is all about knowing we have a choice. I have a choice of yelling right now if I'm angry, or I also have the choice of walking away and coming back when I'm calmer, or saying that I need space. And I've noticed that a lot from people, like both in a professional and a personal context. Sometimes it's really hard for people to stop and make the decision to not do something that they will regret later.
I know.
It's kind of hard, right?
Yeah, because if you think like most of the time that we are impulsive, it's because we want to escape or to avoid something that is going on, like in our body, in our mind, maybe at the time. That it could be a sensation of discomfort or maybe, some kind of like feelings that we don't want to feel. But discomfort is completely normal in our life.
Yeah.
And as you say, if we just sit and stay there with the discomfort, it's actually a kind of like positive sensation because it brings like the awareness of what's going on, what I need like to do right now, or maybe other time is just maybe like staying there and allow yourself to accept and the things they are like this, that you cannot control it, you cannot change it.
Yeah, that's true. I guess accepting that we cannot change certain things is hard,
Yeah.
especially when things get out of hand. So yeah, it's a skill to learn. I've noticed that it's a skill to learn. It's not as easy as people make it to be. And when we talk about the topic of mindfulness and open-mindedness, I want to ask you to bring out some more insights on this relationship, because I guess for a lot of people, they might have heard the words, definitely, but the science behind the words, that's new to a lot of us. So what is the relationship between mindfulness and open-mindedness?
Yeah, as I say before, I think it's pretty much bringing awareness of all the bias that we have maybe in our life when it comes like to the process of thinking or decision making. That it could be like different bias, so the bias maybe a confirmation bias, knowledge bias, just bringing awareness, but at the same time not being judgmental against this bias and saying, oh, I'm having a bias, I'm distorting my view here, I should have done this. Because definitely something that we don't want. I mean, being mindful at the same time accepting all the good part of ourselves, and also maybe like what we relate or we classify as a maybe wrong part of ourselves, that we don't like it, because it's part of us. I mean, if you are open mind, you are not a person that you have a dichotomous thinking and you think that everything is bad or good. It's just that at the time that's what's happening for us, or that who we are, but it doesn't mean that in the future we cannot change it. So definitely it's bringing awareness of that and being open, like in a way that you think about this bias and saying, okay, I'm having this kind of thinking, what I can do about this, how I can change it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so important, because a lot of the time people walk away from having to deal with things, and having the mindfulness to be open-minded is so important, even though that sounds like a mouthful. It's like a tongue twister. But I think it's important because we just sometimes walk away and we just don't act upon what we needed to do in the first place, and be open-minded about the possibilities of different ways of resolving a situation, which I have encountered myself personally, so can totally relate. But I think there's another part when it comes to decision making that might hinder a lot of people from thinking about what other options they have, which is anxiety and perhaps fear of a lot of different things. And I'm sure you've encountered this, because you've done psychology, you know what it is. But I want to hear your thoughts on the relationship between how people can tolerate uncertainty and mindfulness in the context of making all the decisions, and you might have a bit of anxiety, and life's hard. Sometimes you just kind of forget that you can actually bring mindfulness back to a situation where it's really uncertain. It's hard for you to navigate.
Well, when it comes to the para anxiety, I have to admit I was, and I'm still one of the person that, sometimes I all the part, of anxiety, and I recognize, and it's completely normal, I think in our lives, that particularly if it's something that we really care about, or that we are really, scared about, like we have this kind of feeling of anxiety because we want to control everything. Let's start with that. Like, we feel safe if we control everything, and we feel safe if we are able, to predict our future, whatever is going on, and knowing, that maybe we're gonna live a happy and good life and knowing all the things that are going to come for us, but that's not possible. And it feels maybe one of the main things that the pandemic teach us about. It's that everything is uncertain. That like you can wake up one day with having your work, and a day after maybe you lose your work. There is a pandemic. It's hitting everyone, and it's difficult to maintain, and also here to be open-minded and trying to find like new solution and new strategies, or how I can do it, how I can resolve this problem. So definitely, like, the part of the aspect, like the beauty of the mindfulness, it's that as it does, with the judgment and with the thinking, it can allow like yourself in try to be more open about whatever is gonna happen, and to the present moment. So you don't think about the future, you don't think about your past. What you think is what's happening now, what I'm having now, who I am now. So it's just, switching the perspective on just the present moment.
Yeah.
And not like our past life or our future life, that they are important, but it's a kind of mechanism of our mind that it's, kind of running from one point to another for not staying with the discomfort that maybe the present moment is bringing to us.
Yeah.
And the other thing, as we were saying before, it's sitting with the discomfort, because being uncertain is sitting with this sensation of what's happening, what's next, what I can do about this. As I was saying before, sometimes there are maybe strategies that you can put in place, and other times, what you just need to do is just stay there and flow with wherever it's gonna happen during that moment. But it's interesting because it's our brain, it's completely against us, like in this. It really wants, safety and certainty about, the things that happen in our life. Like I remember that I read one of the studies, like in the research that was about this, and there was like these kind of people that they're giving them the option of sitting there not knowing what was going on, or the other options was to get like kind of electroshock.
Oh yes, I've read about that. Oh my gosh, that's mind blowing. It was pretty hilarious as well. Like the number of people that chose the electroshock. Like, whoa.
Compared like to sitting there not knowing what is going next, because that's our brain, at least to say, okay, at least I'm gonna, know that there is electroshock, that I'm gonna have like pain for maybe minutes and everything, but after it's gone, compare like maybe to sitting there 1 hour and saying, oh, what's going next? And maybe, your mind is running with all the thoughts about this, and, you start having this kind of anxiety, stressful, like,
so
thoughts.
True.
So that's our mind.
Yeah. It's hard because this is back to mindfulness and being open-minded, because a lot of people are kind of saying, there's no way I can sit in silence for an hour, right? And I was like, yeah, sure. If it's hard, it's hard. But if we actually have the open-mindedness to try it, it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it helps to process thoughts. At least for me, I've noticed that. Last weekend I was in Sydney. I went to Coogee Beach, and there was this really beautiful cliff that was kind of overlooking the bats. And I was there. I was sitting there for 1 hour straight, doing nothing, just watching the waves. And it's the best thing that I ever done in my life. At the same time, people kind of came and went, and all they wanted to do was kind of take photos and walk away. And then I was kind of like, wow, it's so different, because I used to be those people.
Yeah.
And now I'm sitting here by myself with my thoughts. And it's great, because we need those moments to help us make better decisions. I felt like after that, I felt so much calmer. I felt like I was more mindful and grounded in what I wanted to do in terms of deciding on actions to take or like things to do, especially in my personal life. There's just so much going on as well as work. And I guess that helps. So to anyone that's kind of wondering or on the fence about this, I would say, yeah, it helps. Yeah.
Particularly now that we have, this kind of chaotic life where we don't have any time to just sit there and take, a space for ourselves.
Yeah.
So definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for that. It's been great, been enlightening, especially when there are so many different concepts nested together. It's hard to unpack the relationship between them, but I guess we've got our conclusion, and let's get practical. So for us to get practical, we have a section where we call practice or habit experiment debrief. You must have done something in your lives that maybe on the daily, on the weekly, to help you with your open-mindedness. So we're keen to hear about that. What is a practice that you've done to help you with your open-mindedness?
Well, of course, when it comes to mine, I think it's all the part of the mindfulness, because it's been, I think, 5 years that I'm into all the part of the mindfulness, and that's starting as a kind of teacher, like before and after, also practicing like every day. But yeah, definitely both the formal side or the informal side of the mindfulness. Because when it comes to mindfulness, I think that most of the people, they have this kind of image from films or book that you just sit there and you stay with your thoughts or wherever it's going on.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's one part, of the mindfulness, that it could be called as like the formal one, where you take space for yourself and you just stay there and meditate. But what I try to do is just being aware every second, like during my day. And that could be like also now, like sitting here and at the same time, speaking with you, but being aware of whatever is going on, like in your body. Maybe I'm a little bit stressed, this shortbread and everything.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that it's going to help you to recognize like your thoughts and your sensation, and at the same time, like bringing your decision making or your problem solving to an upper level in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. So coming back to the practice that you did. That's the question. So that's great context to why we should start doing this. But what helped you personally? What is a practice that you did that helped you personally to help you with your open-mindedness? It doesn't have to be sitting still. It could be anything. I wonder what it is for you.
It's sitting there with all the emotions, that are going on, and at the same time putting on a paper in a kind of journaling way.
Oh, journal. Okay.
Yeah. Exactly. Putting on a paper in a kind, of journaling way. I'm a fan of the list of the pro and cons.
Yep. That sounds great, especially for decision making.
Exactly.
Pros and cons.
Yeah, exactly. Particularly like if, some kind of big decision like coming up and everything. I think that it's something like putting on the paper. It's something that make you realize like what's going on in your mind. So the first benefit is you realize what's going on in your mind. What about two other benefits that you've noticed from doing this? All the part of the creativity that it could be, connected also like being open mind, because you come up with a lot of like new strategies, new idea, on how maybe to do it, new way that you didn't think about it before.
Yeah.
And I think the last one is the curiosity about like the diversity of the other people, and at the same time like that you really commit to the development of yourselves. Like you want to be an interesting people, we want to have knowledge about the things and like all the part of the personal growth. So definitely
for sure. I think that's good. It'll help people to start doing this, but I guess there will be a lot of challenges to start doing this, especially when we've said this before, sitting with yourself is so hard, and then everyone's busy and no one's making time to journal, sort of sometimes it's like that. I know that a lot of people are journaling religiously. They're really good at it, and but making pros and cons list while reflecting on your decisions or things that you need to think about in more detail, I guess that's tougher. So what sort of challenges did you encounter when you started doing this?
Well, I have to admit, when I start, particularly I think like around, the mindfulness area, I remember the first time that I meditate and I say, okay, I set a time, like 5 minutes, I stay there and I meditate. And it was pretty much funny because it went like as the film of Julia Roberts, you know. I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have this kind of Zen mode and I'm going to stay here, no thoughts, nothing, just by myself. And he came up with all these thoughts and everything. And I started like my attention was switching like between all the thoughts that I was having and at the same time maybe like the sensory aspect that I have around. And so I was saying, oh, that's a bird. Oh, that's a... And after I was start thinking, what am I gonna do next? So I was making a list like in my mind on all the things that I need to do from the next part. So it was funny because I start to be a kind of judge of myself and say, okay, mindfulness is not this. I definitely not to do this. I need to being here, like on a kind of empty level without any thoughts or anything. So the more I learn, the more, it's maybe acceptance. It's the way that you accept yourself. That's the hardest, I think, challenge that it came. Because expose yourself, and it could be mindfulness, it could be journaling, it could be all the activity, that you do to gather better knowledge of yourself. It's definitely hard if you don't start from a base that you accept yourself for who you are.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a circle, of keep fighting and saying, I shouldn't be this person. I shouldn't. And that's not helpful if we look on the long term on the process of growing.
Yeah, especially if you want to accept yourself as you are and make decisions that are good for yourself.
Yeah,
totally. It's definitely challenging, and thank you for sharing about those challenges. It's pretty funny when you mentioned you got like, I'm switching. I was like, yep, I've been there, definitely been there. Sometimes I do guided meditation, and my thoughts still jump. All I need to do is listen to what that person's saying, and all I can think about is like my to-do list.
Yeah.
So totally relate to that. So how often do you practice this? You said you sit down with your thoughts, you write down pros and cons. I'm guessing you're not writing pros and cons lists every day. So, what's the frequency? How do you set up time to do that?
I think it depends, of how important is the aspect for me. So on a kind of mindfulness, I think on a kind of daily basis, but I have to admit, like in the last period, as I was telling you before, like it's been crazy. So I didn't have like time for the normal basic needs, like that we have, like eating or drinking. So I was doing like more informal, mindfulness and just take time and sit there. But all the part of the journaling, when I experienced that, I really, my mind, it started like rushing a lot around, all the part of the things and try, to find a solution. And I'm seeing, that it's really jumping from one idea to another. I try to do all the part of the journaling, to sit in there, to write it down. And I find it really helpful because after that, most of the maybe things that you have or information you were taking in consideration, you see after on a different perspective and you say, okay, it's not going to help me.
Yeah. That's so good to hear. And I guess, making time to do that whenever you need it is important, because I'm also guilty of not doing it as religiously as I would like. Not making pros and cons lists, but, journaling and writing things down when I need to. And sometimes I open my journal, I'm like, holy cow, the last entry was like 2 weeks ago. What's going on? Something's wrong here. Need to journal. And whenever I do that, I feel better and more grounded. Yeah. And then I think like I automatically make pros and cons list in my mind as well, or just analyze what happened and to really unpack my emotions. Because sometimes it's really good to get that down on paper.
Yeah.
It's easily getting away from you if you're not going to do that. So it's very important practice. So once you've done this, what did you notice in your life? How did it impact your well-being and your perception in life?
It helped me like on a kind of open-mindedness like way, to reframe the story that I was telling about myself. So definitely like I always have some kind of beliefs about myself that it could be like, I don't know, deriving from my childhood or the experience, that I have in my life. And after when I start like see him from a different perspective, I say, okay, I'm this, but I'm also something else. So what's the something else that I am?
Yeah.
I think, that it's a continuously questions Like, I remember there was one of the workshops that I did around the mindfulness area, that it's called like within, and that it's 3 days where basically like you stay there, you meditate, you completely switch off from whole social network and everything. And at dedicate hours, there are like session where you are in pair with another person, and the only question that you are allowed to ask to yourself and to the other person is who I am. And it was so difficult because you start, with all the layers that you create about yourself. So you start, okay, my work, my social area, my family. And after they say that's part of you, but if you take it out, these layers, they arrive to the core, who I am. And that's, I think, that's the most important part that I'm still discovering about myself, like who I am.
Yeah.
Because I always have beliefs and conception of part of myself, but that keeps changing. It's continuously flow, like, in the life and everything, you never remain yourself, like in all the different phases of your life. So
yeah, totally. I mean, it's good for everyone to hear because it comes from your personal experience, and it helps. Oh, it's now my turn to hit the mic. So yeah, it's just good to be able to relate to someone who actually went through the same thing, because sometimes it's hard to hear the theory and kind of like, oh yeah, it's easy to sit with your thoughts. Sure, no, it's not, and in practice it's not, but it's important, and so let's try and do it. Make time for it. And I guess doing it at least if you're new weekly, and then increase the frequency. But yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's a kind, as Kabat-Zinn would say, it's a kind of consistency that you need to give to the practice, because it's a practice that you need to do. So we have the skill, we have growing up, as a child, like we were born as a child, we were mindful. Because if you look at the child, all the children and everything, it's fantastic because they can stay there like 1 hour just to look at the butterfly, and try, to discover all the, aspect of the butterfly, and all the part, the sensation maybe of the seeing, touching, the butterfly and everything. Yeah. But after we grow up in this chaotic environment where you have thousands of things to do during the day, and you lose that perception of being mindful, and you need to relearn it. Yeah. And as we were saying before, it's a kind of like neuroplasticity. Our brain, it's already developed to have this skill. It's a matter of practicing and creating this kind of new connection.
Yeah, totally. So our final question on the practice. You've discussed the topic, you've talked about your own practice. What is another practice that you would recommend everyone to combine this with so that they can improve their level of open-mindedness?
I think that I relate to something that you were saying before, about being grounded, because that's another aspect, like, of being open-minded. If you are grounded, like, if you really also bring awareness, to the fact that sometimes we are a lot in our minds and in our thoughts, and that we need to switch off our brain and just coming back in our body, like, to listen better and to do better decision if you think about, the decision-making process. So it's all the part of, I don't know if everyone heard about, like, the bioenergetic exercise.
No, I haven't heard about that before. What is that?
It's a kind of tradition that arrived like from, I think, Chinese tradition, but at the same time also Buddhist like tradition. So they are some kind of exercise that they are based, of moving the energy in your body. So particularly like when you're feeling anxious or when you're having panic attack, you need, to switch the energy in your body. That maybe it's all around, the head and the thinking that you're having, and you need to be more grounded. Yeah. So these exercises, they are basically, based on feeling the ground or move your body in order, to rebalance the energy that we are having and be more grounding on the ground and feel, that we are capable, that we have self-confidence, that we can create our own reality. Yeah. So yeah, it's a kind of like mindfulness body movement. And I think that they are really great because coming from a person that was really anxious, and still really anxious, sometimes when I notice that I'm anxious, what I do is could be like just if I'm sitting like at the work, just like bringing the awareness at my feet or stomp my feet, on the ground and start shaking my legs so that energy is coming down and flowing like on a part of, of the ground and everything. Or if I have at home, I love like to be barefoot and just walking and like putting the tension like
interesting
on the walking.
Yeah. Especially, I think if we can do that on the grass, that'll be really cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that'll be really helpful because, carpets, floorboards, they kind of like show you're connected, not to the earth. And I feel like, connecting to Mother Earth is going to be very helpful in staying grounded. And that's really nice to close out the practice part. Thank you. We have quite a few practices that we can put in our pocket and take them out whenever we want to start this journey of being open-minded and mindful.
Yeah.
I think it's a really nice combination because, if we just talk about open-mindedness without talking about mindfulness, it will be a very different conversation. Yeah, so this is interesting. Now, I have some interesting audience questions for you, and I think you're going to like these. So we've touched on these before, but I think these two questions can really help us to summarize our conversation. So what are some beginner techniques for people looking to start a mindfulness practice? Interesting. Beginner techniques.
I think as you were saying before, all the guided meditation is something like that it's really helpful. And I mean, right now you can have tons of app that they are providing like the guided meditation exactly for free. And it's amazing because some of them, they have this kind of courses that they bring you like towards all the different parts of the mindfulness. Or if you just want to start, like there are also either maybe guided meditation and they are maybe focused on some problem, like if you have anxiety and everything. So definitely I would suggest like starting with that. I keep using sometimes all the part of the guided meditation. It's like nice, to be guided by another person while you're doing your practice.
Yeah, so that's one technique. What about some other techniques that they can try besides guided meditation?
I would love the part, and it's something, that we don't bring awareness like about, or the part maybe of the eating. It's something that it's really easy. I start like with the children when I teach mindfulness to them. I start, with the part of the eating because it's easy. Like you do every day. And it's just exactly.
How do you eat?
Exactly. How do you eat? Or like, what do you feel like about, I don't know, this food that you're eating, which kind of sensation you're having, how is reacting your body about this. So definitely that could be like a small starting. Or another part that I love, it's also, maybe when you need to like doing a shower or something. Also there, like starting with the contact like on yourself.
I think there's a technique I picked up from another podcast, I think. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You'd probably know about that all too well. So,
that's also nice. I use like with the clients that I work with, like as a kind of like starting point.
For those who don't know about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 practice, can you explain what it is? Just in case.
It's based on the different sensations. So like it's seeing maybe 5 things around you, or experiencing, like touch maybe other 4 things, or eating like other 3 things. So it's all based like on a different sensation and bringing awareness like on the different like feelings that we are having at the moment. But it's great as a starting point.
For sure. So it's all to do with the senses. We need to put them to use, It's great. Okay, final question from the audience is, how does mindfulness look like in a decision-making process?
I think that as we were saying before, maybe the good aspect of the mindfulness in the decision-making process is, well, I will quoted us in this, like on a kind of problem solving is that you can solve the problem with strategies that they are not the same that they create the problem. So it means, like how you approach, to the problem or the decision making, because sometimes what we want is just, to arrive to the final goal, maybe to have this decision making, to make the decision without, thinking about like the process of how we can make this, how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's more thinking like on a kind of abstract way on how to do it, like which are the steps, which are the questions that are going to bring me to arrive there. And I can do this, like we were saying before, if I'm open-minded, if I'm flexible around, everything that is happening, like the ideas that I'm having.
Yeah.
And if I'm not like narrow mind, maybe around, some kind of like beliefs or bias, that we are having before.
Yeah. So true. Actually, I noticed another question. I'm not going to ask you the official question, but I'm going to relate it to this question because the question is about being mindful in a tense meeting, which, in a tense meeting, you got to have to make some tough decisions sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's so simple as decide to say something or to not say something. And that helps, what you just talked about. Just notice, pay attention to the process of getting to the conclusion, even if it's a really quick process. If you decide to say something, it's probably like a 1-2 second thing, but whether you say a really nice thing and constructive feedback or you say something that's not going to help anyone, that is a decision. And I think it helps because I remember this so well. Like I remember not long ago, I had a meeting that was really tense. And it wasn't directed to me or anything, but I noticed these two colleagues talking to each other. And it was interesting because the colleague that made a snide remark received another snide remark from the other colleague. And then to kind of shut down the imbalance between what was discussed. And then after that meeting, the colleague that gave the comeback was saying, I'm sorry for saying that. I know it was not helpful, but I had to say it.
Yeah.
It was a decision. And I think there was mindfulness involved in that. But I guess for us to continually make better decisions and, just have better conversations, it's so important.
Yeah.
Because sometimes conversations shut down because you just don't have any mindfulness in that and deciding what to say. Similarly speaking, in bigger context, like deciding what to do, it can have really big impacts on our lives. Like, a second long decision can have a lasting impact. There's so many movies about that. Yeah.
It's true. I agree.
Yeah. This is so great. Such a great topic. I've loved talking about this and we can talk about it all day, but I'm going to wrap it up here and invite you to close it out with our last section called Open Mic. And in the beginning, you mentioned that there's so much that you've been working on and you're passionate about resilience. So yeah, we would love to hear more about this, let us know.
Well, I think, that it's connected with all the mindfulness and open-mindedness aspect because resilience, it's also a skill that it's within us. Like it's the capacity, to overcome difficulties and at the same time, like getting better and stronger after the difficulties. But in order to do that, as we were saying before, you need to be vulnerable, you need to be authentic, you need to be open-minded, like at the moment, and see, the difficulty that you are going through as a kind of constructive way, to grow in yourself, like in some kind of self-development and in your personal growth. I think that the metaphor could be like summarized as a kind, of surfer. I love the metaphor of surfing, like connected to mindfulness, because if you think about it, like the waves could be our problem or our difficulties that we need to experience like every day or like in our life. And surfing, it's about learning how to surf this wave. It's not going against the wave, or it's not, stay sitting there and passive accepting, the fact that, yes, they are coming, but it's try to learn your skills on how to surf it and how to make the most out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a nice message to close this out. Thank you for doing that. I have to give a little plug because we actually do have another show on resilience at LMSL. So it's not my podcast, it's by my colleague Tia, but it's called Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. We have amazing guests on there. I was actually watching the shows over the weekend. It was so great to see all these experts talking about how you can, leverage different aspects in your life to become more resilient. Yeah. And to bring it back to this topic, I guess it's also very important in the context of being open-minded, because to me, when you discussed all these aspects and described all the different areas that we might encounter in our lives, if we don't have the open-mindedness to think about different ways to solve a situation, for example, there's no resilience. It's kind of like, there's just so much that are related to one another. It's kind of like, it's not two things related to each other, but it's kind of like this really interesting circle of things, or maybe even like a group of things that we can identify and kind of map out their relationship. And that's what I took from this conversation. It's complex, but it's important to know. And we should all be trying and practicing ways to become more open-minded.
Agree.
Yay. Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. And before I let you go, I want to ask you, and I'm sure the audience would be keen to find out more, how can they follow your work?
On LinkedIn.
Yeah.
All the part on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm actually planning to start like a new channel on Instagram about this aspect. So
Oh, absolutely great. Okay, you gotta let us know the link and the handle so we can link it to the show notes and our listeners can access it. So I'm guessing your LinkedIn would be your name, Marta Landoni.
Correct.
I'm going to add you as well. So I'm going to do that. Thank you so much. And I really enjoyed the conversation. And thank you for making your time and being here, even though you have so many different emergencies.
Thank you for welcoming me.
You've been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast, produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.